Hey there, all you betweeners. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Between Podcast. This is your host, Matt Matson. We are really trying to build a global community all about the intersection of your faith and human connection. And we're really glad you're listening today. I'm super excited about this episode. We're going to have a sacred conversation about sacred conversations with our special guest, MaryB Safrit. Mary B is a New York City based relationship coach, an author, the host of a podcast called Bound Family. And she also makes and sells some pretty fun and empowering clothing and merchandise. She is obsessed with all things hospitality, spirituality, culture, and relationship building. Man, that's a fun combination of stuff for us to talk about. Mary B, it is so great to have you here. I don't know, what's your life like right now? Give us a peek inside your world.
Sure. Welcome to my little one bedroom apartment in New
Yeah.
York City on the
Yeah.
Upper East Side. I love my neighborhood because it's not very trendy. And so, you get a lot of that kind of trendy stuff in the East Village and the West Village. And I like to just have my cozy little home base where I can go to those places and then come back and hang out in my neighborhood I'm near Central Park, I'm near the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And there's just a lot of old people and
Yeah.
families, and it's a relatively chill neighborhood here. And I really like it. It's great. New York is just a really great creative environment. I'm between churches right now, but I've gotten really involved with a queer Bible study. That's been really, really incredible. Organization is called Kaleidoscope,
Yeah.
and they're based here in New York City. And that's one of the things I love about New York is that whatever you're into, whatever you're looking for, chances are you're not the only one because
Yeah.
there's just so many people. So
Yeah.
statistically, you're going to find someone who's looking for that same thing. And so you can really find some very niche interests, very niche little pockets of community. And that's been really, really cool to dive into.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spend a lot of my time working here in my little apartment, doing some writing and podcasting and merch designing and selling and all sorts of stuff. Do a little dog walking and dog sitting on the side.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, hang out with my friends. It's
Yeah.
great.
Can I ask a follow-up about the queer Bible study that you found? First of all, I assume like
Yeah.
is it an in-person Bible study or is it something online?
Hmm.
So in person. So how do
Yeah.
you find it? So I'm always fascinated by because I think there are a lot of people, whether they live in New York City or they live in a tiny town out in the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
it is hard. It's hard to get out your door to go find the people to connect with about the things that you
Yeah.
want to connect with, right? It's a whole, I shouldn't say it's hard to get out your door. I should say it's just so easy. The gravity is so heavy
Yeah.
inside your door, wherever it's comfortable to just keep you there. I'm so curious about the process of finding that Bible study, the first the first outreach, the first time you showed up. Can you I know this isn't really what we're talking about, but I'm that is such a fascinating like what did you do? How did you find it? It sounds like it's a relatively new thing for you.
It
What was that
is.
story?
Yeah, so I found out about Kaleidoscope back when I was quote unquote straight. And I had, let's see, how did I get connected? So they have a course called Aspiring Allies.
Hmm.
And a friend that I knew through a creative community, creative Christian community that I was
Mhm.
part of, was taking the course and told me about it. And I was like, man, that sounds like a great organization. They're doing ally training, they do training for pastors, but really their heart is to create a safe space for queer folks to explore faith, to
Yeah.
explore Christian faith specifically and spirituality, um, which is just such a beautiful mission. And back when I was a very passionate ally, and I just was like, man, I got to connect with these people, and especially because they're in New York. It's an organization I wanted to support. And so I had one of the founders, Meg Botts, on my podcast.
Yeah.
And we talked about how to be an ally and all sorts of really incredible stuff. It's a great episode. It's still up. How to be an ally to the LGBTQ plus community with Meg Botts. And so I had her on the podcast. And pretty shortly thereafter was when I was already wrestling with my own sexuality at this point, very inward facing work that I was doing. Um, and a few months after that, finally was able to come out to myself as bi. And that really was a scary thing in a lot of ways. I was attending a non-affirming church that um, I don't know. I realized for a long time it was no longer a good fit, but there wasn't a big thing that had fully pushed me out the door quite yet. And
Yeah.
coming out and realizing I'm affirming and I think that God's cool with me dating women as well as men as well as non-binary folks. And so this isn't the place for me anymore. But knowing that there was a place for me was huge in my coming out journey,
Yeah.
knowing that I had a place to land no matter
Yeah.
what went down with my church, that there was a place where I could bring all of myself. And so the
Yeah.
first time I actually volunteered with Kaleidoscope, I wasn't out to them quite yet. Just because I don't know, it hadn't come up. And it's
Uh-huh.
this weird experience when you're coming out of who do I tell and how do I tell them and when. And like, as someone who has some social anxiety as well,
Yeah.
I want to know, I like am just very hyper conscious of these kinds of things. So, the first time I actually volunteered with them was at Pride,
Mm.
New York City Pride,
Yep.
and we were, handing out iced tea to people who were at Pride and had a little booth and had these stickers that said God is queer, and we're just kind of engaging with people, telling them about Kaleidoscope, and that was my first experience. Um, it was also actually, funnily enough, the same day that I left my church for the last time.
Wow.
That was
Yeah.
the last day that I went to my church. Left my church. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go back because my body wouldn't let me. I would just have these really big emotional breakdowns
Yeah.
after pretty much every service for a couple of months. And I was like, I just can't keep doing this to myself. Went from there to Pride and had this really cool experience of like putting on my little bisexual pride necklace
Mhm.
and just interacting with the different people there and being in the midst of Christians who were there celebrating Pride, who were there. I mean, they had people who were holding up apology signs. They had people who were doing free mom and dad hugs.
Yeah.
And then they had this booth offering refreshment because it's 1,000 degrees at the end of
Yeah.
June in New York.
Yeah.
um, and so offering refreshment and also offering people a safe place to explore faith and
Yeah.
just letting people know that that is a thing, that there is a space where if you're curious about this, like this is a space where both and all parts of you are
Yeah.
welcome. And
Yeah.
we think they are actually both important to you and to your life and to that, sexuality and spirituality can inform each other in this really beautiful way and that
Yeah.
God loves all of you.
Yeah. So I'm struck by two big things. One is just a line you said. I think it was probably like a hanging modifier, but I loved this line. You kind of said it and then you paused. You said, "I think God's cool with me," and like all of you, and that whoever gave you that gift or whatever inside gave you that confidence to be able to feel in that moment a moment of significant transition in your life, whether it felt like it or not, right? Like a moment where the ground might have been shaken underneath you, to feel like, you know what, I just think God's cool with me. Like
Mhm.
what a line. That is such a silly, like simple line. You should put that, maybe that's for some merch at some point. But
Yeah,
like
put it on a t-shirt.
but man, if all of us could feel that at some
Mm,
point,
yeah,
all of us have some reason that we've been told by other people that God isn't cool with us, but
yeah.
for whatever reason, you had that sense of peace that I think probably led you to find other people. So, okay, so here's the other thing I wanted to ask. This is a real question. You said you're between churches, but you're currently going to Kaleidoscope, this queer Bible study. Here's my real question. If you wanted to find another church,
Mhm.
what would it offer to you that Kaleidoscope isn't currently offering? Part of that is me asking the question, what the heck is a church in
Yeah.
2024?
Yeah.
What does it deliver to us? What do we want from it? If we were to make one right now, how should we be making it? And I think I really want to ask, like you found community, you found
Yeah.
scripture study, you found people around you, right? You found purpose, you found ways to volunteer, right? I'm guessing all those things are happening. What are you
Mhm.
missing that you would love to find in a new church, but you aren't currently getting out of this particular Bible study?
It's a good question. And I think I definitely at this point consider Kaleidoscope my church.
Yeah.
Um, it's not, I grew up going to uh my parents go to separate churches, and so I kind of bounced back and forth between them. They're married. It's a thing that I didn't know was a weird thing until like after I was out of college.
Right.
And people were like, "Oh, I assume your parents are divorced." And I'm like, "No, they just do their own thing on Sunday morning."
Yeah.
But the very traditional churches and historic churches as well. I mean, they were built in like the 1800s. And so I do have this association with, my mom's Episcopal church was very quote unquote high church.
Mhm.
And my dad's Methodist church still was very mainline and had a solid liturgy and all of that. So I think that there is that liturgical component, maybe,
Mhm.
even though my friend Terry Stokes would maybe say that, uh, and past podcast guests would say that liturgy is just like all churches and all like a lot of places have liturgy because it's just like an order of how things are done.
Yep.
So my Bible study has a liturgy,
Yeah.
right? We have
Right.
dinner and hangout time, and then we do our Bible study, and then we have worship, and then we have prayer, and then we go home. So
Yes.
that's a liturgy in and of itself. But this kind of um, formalized liturgy or this formalized way of worship that connects me to uh, it gives me a felt sense of connection to maybe my ancestors of
Yeah.
the faith.
Sure.
And then, there's this great line, and this is something that I was going to bring up later.
Mm.
There's this great line in uh, the Episcopal Eucharist that right before we sing the Alleluia, there's an official name for it. I don't know what it is, but
Mhm.
um, that talks about, and now with choirs of oh man, it's been a really long time since I've been to a physical church, so I can't
Yeah.
recite it, but it talks about with the communion of saints.
Yeah. Yeah.
We raise our voices and sing, and we
Yeah.
sing the Alleluia. And something about that ritual and that mention of this is a liturgy that's been like this for generations. And
Yeah.
also, there's this acknowledgement that it's not just us here saying these words, we are part of something so much bigger.
Yeah.
And so it's not that Kaleidoscope isn't that because I think it is. I think it is its own kind of church,
Yeah.
where two or three are gathered, blah blah blah. But I think there's maybe that yeah, there's that felt sense of connection that maybe um I just haven't experienced in the same
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
because I'm so used to these very structured,
Yeah.
organized religious spaces.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's more so.
Yeah.
And
I
also,
love,
I'm used to, sorry, one more thing that just came to my
yeah.
mind. I'm used to there being like Sunday church plus like a community group or Bible study
Yeah.
or something like that. And so having it just be the community group Bible study, there's something there I think that is a little bit of dissonance
Mhm.
in my brain. And again, not like it is a valid
Mhm.
church experience, this Bible study. It's more just this is what I'm used to. This is what I grew up with. This
Yeah.
was what I did
Yeah.
for most of my life. And so now it's been very destabilizing to have to reimagine church to the extent that I have had to.
Yeah.
And so finding my footing has definitely been very tricky, and I'm still doing it, frankly.
I think there's the idea of sitting and reflecting on what has church meant, what does church mean, and what do I want church to mean, and recognizing that in that there might be opportunity for editing what church has meant in the past and
Yeah.
rewriting what it will be in the future, and asking what needs, right? This is all just about prioritizing. Right now, what I'm trying to do is to break down the I don't want to prioritize the institution's needs over
Hmm.
the needs of the people that it serves, right? And I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
that concept could be applied to any number of issues that the faith world is dealing with.
Hmm.
But if we really stop and really fight to reflect about that and say, tear away the funding model, tear away the buildings and the real estate, tear away the tradition for the sake of tradition,
Hmm.
and ask ourselves, how do we reconnect ourselves to the choir of saints? How do we reconnect ourselves to uh, not just tradition, but history, the people, the stories, the long heartbeat that goes back centuries? How do we connect ourselves to that?
Hmm.
But how do we do those things in a way that honors our values today, ourselves today, our identities today, our
Hmm.
the way we want to love each other today? That is such a powerful question. So thanks for letting me ask you what is a really tough question on the spot.
Yeah.
And I loved your answer, actually. I think because it's a little unclear. You sense that you're missing something. It's not, you're not getting 100% of what you want, but you're getting a lot of good things. And you've edited out some of the things that weren't as healthy for you in the past. And I just think
Yeah.
that is such a, for anybody listening to think about that question, and to put yourself in your shoes, put yourself in your neighbor's shoes, put yourself in your enemy's shoes, put yourself in my shoes, put yourself in Mary B's shoes, and ask, what would you create for us right now, today? I think that's just a fun. Anyway, sorry. I don't know why we went down that tangent so early in our conversation, Mary B. That was fun. Okay, let's do this. You say in your bio, and I read a portion of your bio I stole from your website, or maybe something that I've heard you introduce yourself on your podcast, but you are
Hmm.
obsessed with hospitality, spirituality, culture, and relationship building. Those four things. Like I could say that's what Between is about: hospitality,
Hmm.
spirituality, culture, and relationship building.
Hmm.
Man, that's like at the bullseye of what we're trying to do here at Between. I,
Hmm.
I would love to have you break those down for me a little bit. Talk about each of those obsessions in your life. Hospitality seems like a fun one to start with. You're a very
Sure.
hospitable person. You're a welcoming person, and I'm guessing that comes from somewhere. Maybe you've had some practice in the past around that.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, to speak specifically to hospitality first, I grew up in the southeastern United States.
Hmm.
So it was very steeped in Southern hospitality, specifically because I am white and grew up in a very majority white um, environment, the kind of white manifestation of
Yeah,
Southern hospitality, which has its issues, of course. But I think there is that sense of valuing a human person that's coming into your home and figuring out how to make them feel welcome and comfortable. And I think there's an extent to which I maybe overextend myself sometimes in that endeavor, but really learning empathy and compassion, and like you were saying, being able to put myself in somebody else's
yeah,
shoes to really think about how can I present this space to make it as comfortable as possible for this person who's
yeah,
coming into my home.
yeah,
Um, I also worked in food service for 10 years, off and on. And so
yeah,
that's a huge part of it as well, is really thinking about this sense of finite space, or like here's this space and this experience that's one of a kind,
uh-huh,
unique, never to be repeated. How can we capitalize on that, I guess. With food especially, you're coming together with another person, a group of people, and you're having this experience that is very humanizing
Yeah.
because everyone needs to eat, but also can be very like life affirming in the sense that, and very sensual in the sense that it engages so many of your senses
Yeah.
and really has the opportunity to create this little pocket of space where whatever's going on outside, you get to be there and be a person who
Yeah.
is enjoying or connecting with the person across from you through the shared experience of this thing that is very human and very engaging.
Yeah.
So I also, my training is in the performance world,
Yeah.
music performance. And so I think that comes into it as well, where you really think about who is the audience or who is the person that I'm dealing with and what do I want to say to them and how can I create an environment that is going to open them up to this experience that I'm presenting to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a combination of those three things where I think my like bigger mission, I guess, is to make so that people can encounter themselves honestly and joyfully.
Yeah.
And I think the combination of those two things really is at the heart of how I think about hospitality. And it's what are the barriers of the people coming into this space that prevent them maybe from encountering themselves and each other in this very honest and enjoyable way.
Yeah.
And that really creates a felt sense of safety
Mm.
and of just a really disarming environment that is comfortable and makes them feel a little more brave than maybe
Wow.
they would
Yeah.
outside of that. Um, and I think that gives us space to get to some of these deeper questions
Yeah.
about culture, about why we believe what we believe, about what we're missing because of the culture that we grew up in, about what culture has to offer us, about the kinds of relationships we want to have, and maybe where we're not getting that, or why we are the way that we are and what has informed that. I think there can be a lot of barriers to a person feeling like they're in a space where they can let down their own guards and
Yeah.
their own walls to even be honest with themselves. And I think a huge part of that is, for me at least, I like to meet people where they are, of course, but I also like to, I don't know, have the courage to go first is kind of how I phrase
Oh,
it,
yeah.
where I want to show them that I am willing to be honest with myself as well, and I'm willing to I don't know, just say the thing out loud like, "Hey, isn't it weird how like
Yeah.
all of these like there's this epidemic of loneliness and yet we all like so many people feel ashamed of admitting that they feel lonely
Yeah.
when like statistically
Right.
we
Right.
know that that's true."
Right.
Isn't that kind of weird? What do you think that's about?
Yeah.
So like bringing people together to have that playful curiosity
Yeah.
and that honesty with themselves that doesn't feel harsh but feels kind of inviting and
Yeah.
kind. So,
I want
yeah.
to draw a circle around the metaphor of you working in food service, and I imagine uh, being a part of a server team who is creating a space for people to share a meal, like that
Mhm.
metaphor, and you drawing that out in such a beautiful way, Mary B, and talking about how can I create a space here? How can I create an environment that that allows everybody within the environment to truly be with one another. That
Mm,
metaphor is okay. We could apply that to. I don't know why I'm
yeah.
stuck on reinventing the church today in this particular conversation, but we could
Let's do
apply it
it.
to
We're going to
that.
figure it out.
That's right.
We're going to
I
figure it out
guess
today.
we could apply it to that though, right? Like, who is the? How are we creating an environment where people can truly connect in the deepest way? And that I
Mhm.
don't think that's typically the number one priority
Mm.
if we looked at the budgets and if we looked at the operations and we looked at the
Yeah.
volunteer structure and we looked at the staffing, I don't think people would point to that and say that's the number one priority of the way
Mhm.
most American faith communities actually run. But I'd also say the same thing about our workplaces, right?
Mhm.
Somebody who creates an environment where our coworkers can truly connect. If you want productivity to soar, like that's the thing to do, but that is not typically our highest priority. I talk about the same thing at our family dinner tables, at my own family dinner tables, my wife and I and our two daughters. Like, yeah, are we creating tonight, am I going to actively work to create an environment where we can really connect, or am I going to be really tired and am I just going to try and get through the meal and try to, have all of the day's work in my head still and all tomorrow's to-do lists in my head still? And like that becomes the question. Can I actively work to create that environment? I just love that, Mary B, because hospitality can so often be downplayed.
Mhm.
Hospitality can so often be pointed at and say, yeah, like be nice to people, I guess, whatever, who cares? No, like that's it. Like hospitality is important. This is the Mary and Martha story in the Bible, right? Like this is Martha was the hero of the story. Everybody points to her as the villain of the story. She's the
Yeah.
hero. She's actively working to create an environment for other people selflessly.
Yeah.
Uh, and we treated her in the same way that we often treat our servers in restaurants,
Mhm.
as just yeah, just go away and give me the bill as fast as you can. But when we invite them into the experience as well,
Mhm.
this is embarrassing to say, Mary B, but nah, I'm not that embarrassed. Uh, I've become a regular at a bar near my house,
Yeah.
a brewery, and my wife and I have because we have been sneaking away for little happy hour dates. We'll just,
Mhm.
every once a week, maybe we'll go and for an hour before we have dinner with our family, and we'll just go and have a little date together, like in the middle of
Yeah.
the afternoon, and it works better than trying to plan anything else, and it's awesome. But we have a server there. Her name is Ashley, and we've gotten to know her. And there's something about having somebody who knows you and somebody who you know, and the interaction changes, right? She's no longer the bartender at Lariat Lodge in Littleton, Colorado. She's
Mhm.
Ashley, and I'm curious about her, and I'm curious about her daughter, and I'm curious and she's curious about us and we feel welcome and there's a reason we go back often. It's because we enjoy it, but also because Ashley is a part of the dynamic and like
Mhm.
we have a wonderful experience. And I just think about hospitality as is so much more than we give it credit for, I guess is what
Mhm.
I'm trying to say. And you said it much better than me, but then I rambled on for a long time, Mary B. Is there anything else you'd add in that department, well, so I can shut myself up?
Yeah, I think you're touching on a lot of really great things. And something that came to mind while you were speaking is this idea of inviting people to be collaborators and co-creators
Yeah.
in the act of hospitality. One of I think about church and how a lot of churches are structured, and there is a lot of that kind of unsexy background work that
Yeah.
we don't necessarily see,
Yeah.
but is an instrumental part of creating the environment. At the same time, you know, I think about how churches are designed, even where there's, a central focal point that's often
Hmm.
raised. And part of that's logistical, right? So everyone can see. But part of it too is like we're elevating this person. And especially I went to a church where the sermon was a giant chunk of I mean, it was like 35 minutes, which is maybe not, doesn't sound weird to a lot of people, but I grew up with like 10 minutes
Yeah.
being a long
Yeah.
sermon.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, I feel like I'm at school. Um, like if so much of the service is elevated and focused on this one central point, and yes, there's the liturgy where we are actively participating, but at the same time, right? Why are we surprised if the culture and the environment puts so much pressure on and stock in the senior pastor
Right.
to be all of the things, or feels like church is something to witness or be an audience member for versus something that I am essential this space.
Yeah.
So I think there's this was something that my former church talked a lot about, was trying to shift from they called it a no, a come and see church to a go and show movement.
Yeah.
Um, And but I think a huge part of that, a huge part of the barrier can be the unsexy background stuff,
Yeah.
right? And how do we when I think about an event or a podcast or whatever it is, however I'm getting to encounter people and meet with people, right? Is there part of it that is engaging them and welcoming them in and making them feel like you are actually a really important part of this?
Yeah.
Like it would this thing that we're doing would not be the same without you,
Yeah.
because it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And you see that in live theater, even though it is like you're an audience member and they're up there on the stage doing their thing through a fourth wall, like the audience is still part of it, because there is that part of theater culture that's like the actors feed off of the audience.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
right.
the audience gets to be part of it by sending their energy and enthusiasm and reacting in a certain way. So it's a very different dynamic than kind of just sitting back and taking notes and talking when you're supposed to talk,
Right.
versus no, even though I am witnessing what is happening, I am witnessing something going on up front, I'm still part of this.
Yeah.
I think that can be a missing component that I try to really consider
Yeah.
and really think of whoever's attending an event or meeting with me in a little online space to record a podcast. Like, we're both here together creating this thing.
Yeah.
And isn't that amazing? And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're here doing this with me, um, because I can't be doing all this by myself. Like, it's
Yeah.
different and better because
Yeah.
you're here with me.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot with this podcast, and I want to talk about your podcast next. But I've been thinking a lot about, I don't know, just how kind people are when they say yes. How kind you are, Mary B, to say yes to being on this show. I mean, sure, you're promoting your stuff and like what, but I don't actually think that's what's happening here. Like
Mhm.
this, there is something else, something that is people want to be with each other. And when we create genuine space where we can really just listen to each other and be with each other,
Mhm.
and then a lot of people listen to it because we long for that space. There's a reason podcasts are one of the fastest growing things in the world. Like people want to hear, want to
Mhm.
be inside conversations like this because they know they're creating it too. They're a part of
Mhm.
this too. So
Yeah.
tell me about your podcast. So Found Family. I think that's
Mhm.
like a new name. I think it was a different
Mhm.
name before. My sense is, Mary B, your work is maybe at the junction of the LGBTQ plus community, the single community, and the Christian community. And those are
Mhm.
three identities that you've found a way to build a road for and say, hey, if it's helpful, I've built a road for us to walk down.
Mhm.
Will you talk a little bit about maybe all of your work, but the Found Family podcast? What are you trying to accomplish? What are the stories that you're telling there? What's the heartbeat of that work? I'd love to hear you just share that story a little bit.
Yeah. I think podcasting is so incredible. It's a very intimate medium.
Yeah,
And I think so my podcast started as a podcast for singles called Unsuitable with MaryB Safrit. And we've operated as Unsuitable for like 5 years, 5.5 years. And
yeah,
we've just very recently rebranded to Found Family. But the beating heart of it has always been this idea of who, what wisdom and what companionship and what are we missing by centering a very specific kind of person as the kind of person who has the authority to
oh
talk
wow,
about faith.
yeah,
And so, what are we missing? And how can I create a space where the people who have historic or in recent history, especially, been told, hey, you don't actually have anything to add, so just kind of sit on the sidelines and
hmm
let us handle it?
hmm
Like, how can I create a space where it's actually those people who are being centered and those people who like, hey, this thing that this is kind of where the name unsuitable came from. This thing that has been put onto you as a label of something that makes you unsuitable for the church or to talk about faith, that's actually the thing that makes you the person that we want to talk to
Yeah.
because there's something that you know because of that experience and because of that identity. There's a specific way that you encounter God in your actual life.
Mm.
And I think that is deeply needed and deeply important for you and for the church.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of giving the audience a sense of a felt sense of companionship that here's a person whose life is similar to mine in some ways and different in other ways, and they're sharing their story, and so I'm relating to them in that way, and also my imagination is being expanded
Mm.
at the same time about what my life can look like. You know, I've had so many incredible authors and musicians and regular people like who are like working and living their lives, and
Yeah.
you know the gambit of people who are doing the thing and share, just come on and share their wisdom, and I get to fangirl them, and
Yeah.
it's the best part of my job. I get to share them with my people and say, hey, you need to know about this person because
Yeah.
they're awesome and they don't have nearly the platform that they should, because of all of this BS stuff that culture puts onto them to say, hey, this is actually makes you not important or not credible.
Yeah.
So, Found Family, we rebranded to Found Family to widen our pool, I guess, of people that we're talking to,
Mhm.
and also to give people a more generative, inviting thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
Unsuitable is like a
Yeah.
negative word or whatever. Found Family is like, hey, that's something that I want to be part of.
Mhm.
That's something that I want to help build, and that's something that I want, and it's nice. And so that's a big reason for the rebrand.
Mhm.
But I would say that the beating heart of the podcast is the same. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of shifted a little bit. And so we have conversations with folks who have in you know, kind of who have not been centered by the what we might call the evangelical industrial complex.
Yeah.
So who's being published, who is getting asked to speak at conferences in the very white American evangelical church, right? We want to center folks who have been excluded from that because I deeply believe that that's where the real nitty gritty, meaty, good stuff of faith is.
Yeah.
And so it's the tagline is celebrating the creative communities we make in our actual lives.
Yeah.
So kind of removing, you know, if you grew up in or have been in like maybe a high control religious kind of environment, there's all these rules and qualifications or spiritual credentialing that's like, hey, once you get this thing or this the ideal life, that's how you're like really a Christian, or that's
Right.
that those are the signs that you are really living this Christian life. But that's not I don't think that that's good news for very many people.
Yeah.
And I deeply believe that the gospel is good news
Yeah.
for every single person.
Yeah.
And so in this podcast, you know, we're having Christians, non-Christians, and all sorts of humans on to talk about like, hey, how do we like we all need relationships, and there's this path that we have been given that's like the, you know, straight, white, married, suburban family as this like insular household
Yep.
unit that is supposed to be self-sufficient. Um, uh, like we know that that's not, I think intuitively, a lot of people know that that's not how we were really made to live.
Yeah.
And so what are the alternatives? And who are the communities who've actually been doing that for generations? How can we
Yeah.
tap into that? So, this is something that the queer community does and has done beautifully long time, imperfectly, of course, but has done really well because they've had to.
Yeah,
They've been
right.
kicked out of their homes, they've been kicked out of churches, been kicked out of all sorts of places, and really had to fight to create. And that sort of creativity, tapping into that creativity, I think gives us this freedom to experience goodness, to experience God, to experience love, to experience each other in a deeper, richer, more robust way.
Yeah, yeah. I listened to a couple episodes of your show just in preparation for this conversation over the last few days, and I don't remember the name of the guest. I'm embarrassed, but you had a guest on who had built an intentional faith community. uh,
Lynn.
Lynn, yeah,
Yeah.
in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and it was like this residential faith-based community, something similar to a monastery almost. They compared it to, and and queer centered, and like it was just such a that was such a cool guest and such a
Mhm.
great example of exactly what you're talking about. People who've been
Mhm.
doing this for decades, if not longer, and
Mhm.
actively working on it imperfectly and messily and doing it anyway, because this is what we we so desperately long for, all
Mhm.
of us. This true sense of community, this true sense of not an in group so that we can keep the out group out, an in group so that we can feel like we're in, so we can
Mhm.
feel like we belong, so we can feel like we're safe. And so many of us have been told, go to the corner church and you'll find it. And then we
Mhm.
went to the corner church and we didn't find it. In fact, we found
Mhm.
something that felt quite the opposite. And so for you to share those stories, to talk about your own life and your own stories and the way that you're finding family, I just think it is such a life-giving gift, for so many people out there for so many different
Mhm.
reasons too.
Yeah.
And um, I want to admit, Mary B, that I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound slightly just thoughtless or selfish, but I don't give a lot of thought to the singles world, the
Mhm.
people who are single, and as as a straight white cis married male in the
Sure.
suburbs, like it probably doesn't surprise you that I don't give a lot of thought to people who are living a single life, and how single is a whole has a whole set of challenges, or a whole set
Mhm.
of societal challenges that
Yeah.
society has built around the idea of singleness. We talk about that a little bit because I think
Sure.
not that I don't get it, but like I just think I don't give it a lot of thought, and I'm guessing there are other people out there who maybe don't give it a lot of thought either, which is why you show up with a really important gift, to talk about it. Is it okay if I ask you to talk about that a little
I would love to talk about this for the next,
bit?
5 years. This is my bread and butter.
Uh-huh.
This is like what got me started on this whole journey of being a writer and podcaster and all the stuff that I'm doing. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense that it's not a reality that you're very familiar with or
Yeah.
give a lot of thought to. And especially in church environments where there's a stat that I got from Barna, Barna
Mhm.
Research Group that in as of 2017, something like 96% of pastors are married.
Mm.
Um, and
Mm.
yeah, I think like there's sorry, what was the exact question? I can go down a lot of I just got so excited that you asked me about this. I can go down any number of rabbit holes where I'm like, well,
Well,
yes, this and that and that and
let's
that.
frame it this way. I know
Okay.
you wrote a book, I think, called The Single
Yes,
Christian's Church Survival Guide,
I did
which is
indeed.
that is a fantastic title and a tragic title, that there has to be a survival guide for Christians
Right.
at church. So maybe that's a good place to start. Like, what
Sure.
you wrote that, why, and what were you what do people get from that?
Mm.
What's the heart of that message?
Yeah, I think there are I think for for a while now, there's been maybe more conversation about singleness.
Hmm.
But I think for a good number of people, the experience is like if someone's talking about singleness, it's about how to get me unsingle or like
Well,
how to get content. So basically, I don't bother people with what is hard about my life.
yeah.
Um, and so there's more conversation now, I think, about dating. Um, uh, but a lot of it kind of, if you think about a single person in a church, and especially like a white evangelical church, you
Hmm.
maybe would think about a white straight woman in her early 20s who
Yeah.
wants to get married yesterday, and that's her biggest problem,
Yeah.
right? And those people exist
Yeah.
and need to be served for sure.
Yeah.
But there is like a whole host of other human beings who are single who the church doesn't know what to do with because and doesn't have any sense of the realities of what they experience in a church, what they experience going through life. And so like because so many people who are upfront in a church are married, that stuff is just not normalized. There aren't sermon illustrations
Hmm.
about the ins and outs of the single life and, single women, especially older single women, are kind of viewed as like a burden to the
Hmm.
church, which don't even get me started on like the unbiblicalness of that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
like, there's so much about the experience of being a person who is not married, especially a woman who is not married, or a person who is socialized as a woman who is not married, trying to navigate this culture obsessed with marriage and trying to navigate a culture that really kind of sees if she is not a wife or a mother, does not know what to do with her.
Wow. Yeah.
And so trying to enter into that space, there are all sorts of things that a single person might dilemmas that they might experience that makes them feel like I am the weird, awkward one for feeling weird and awkward about this. And so the book is at its heart an attempt to say, hey, you're not weird and awkward. That is
Yeah.
a weird and awkward thing that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
You're probably not the issue here. The
Yeah.
issue is this institution and how it's built, and it's not in its current iteration in many ways not built for you. And so let's talk about how to be how to honor yourself and how to exercise your agency and respond rather than react while also acknowledging like this is a systemic issue that does not have an individual solution.
Yeah.
Like you're not crazy, but here's some stuff that can maybe help you feel like a person while engaging with this stuff. And one of the chapters that I think has been most most relatable to people is the very first chapter that I almost didn't include because I
Hmm.
was like, this is probably me overthinking it. I am like, even me, as I was writing it, there were so many situations that I'm like, I'm just being too sensitive. I'm
Yeah.
being weird. Like I'm overanalyzing this. But the first chapter is about where to sit. Do I sit alone or not?
Oh,
And that's a whole thing
yeah.
because if you're sitting alone, right? People might be looking at you like, oh, poor thing, you're sitting
Yeah.
alone. I feel sorry for you. When it's like, maybe I wanted to sit alone. Like
Yeah.
maybe I just wanted to like kind of be in my own space, you know, or like going to a church for the first time and not knowing, like you see people kind of bunched together in their little family units and you're like, am I going to be taking someone's seat? Am I going to sit down next to a dude and their wife's going to be like weird about
Right.
it and they're going to
Right.
change spots, which it hasn't happened to me, but a human person wrote in to me and told me that that is the
Yeah.
thing that
Sure.
has happened
Yeah.
to them. So something as simple that should not take a lot of thought as where do I sit
Yeah.
is an extra layer of emotional bandwidth that is
Yeah.
expended when you are a single person walking into a space very obsessed with marriage. And so to kind of denormalize that, like it's a weird thing for a stranger to talk about your biological clock or to
Yeah.
like come up to you and ask you how your dating life is going when
Yeah.
maybe you don't want to be dating, or maybe you're like a woman dating women and you don't want to talk to a random stranger about that.
Yeah.
There's like all sorts of things where I want to give single people permission to say, hey, that's weird, and I have a choice in how I respond to it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can be straightforward and, you know, maybe I'm feeling sassy, maybe it's someone I know really well, and be like, what? Why are you asking me that? Like,
Hmm.
hey, when you say that, I feel this.
Hmm.
Diplomatic, where it's you can kind of like get your point across while also like not making them feel too uncomfortable if
Hmm.
you're, a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser like me. And then there's the not worth it, where you can change the subject or walk away and be like, "Hey, you don't have to educate that person. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're like they're never going to get it.
Yeah.
You can just walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay." But to really give like I want single people to reclaim that agency
Mm.
in an environment that does not reinforce that sense of agency for them.
Mm. So I think you wrote like a follow-up ebook about navigating wedding season
Mhm.
as a single person, and I can't help but imagine. I mean, if marriage culture is this sort of big old elephant in the room, especially in American Christian culture,
Mhm.
and it floods everything, and a lot of people don't even notice because they're in the middle of marriage culture. That's how
Mhm.
cultures get built, is because people can't see it.
Yeah.
Weddings are the epitome of marriage culture come to life in right where the question is uh, you're next, right? Are you going to catch the bouquet, right? Like, or whatever
Mhm.
variation of that there
Mhm.
is. What advice do you give to people who might be walking into a series of weddings this upcoming summer or next summer, and they're single and they want to go to the wedding, but they don't want to swim in the soup of people asking awkward questions and being all weird about the simple, plain fact that they're single?
Yeah. I mean, I always like to tell people, um, don't be afraid to say no and to
Mm.
set boundaries for yourself, right? Like there are ways to learn how to sit with the very complex feelings that come up and the very complex situations you'll find yourself in as a single person at a wedding, um, where you can honor like, hey, I feel happy for my friend, like, especially if it's a friend getting married. I feel happy for my friend. And also, I feel nervous about what this is going to mean for our relationship.
Yeah.
And both are okay,
Yeah.
both are welcome. And I can feel both at the same time. I'm not selfish, I'm not weird. Like, I can feel both of those things. Um, Same with like something like a bouquet toss. Some people love it, some people hate it. However you feel about it, like it's okay that you feel that way.
Hmm.
You don't have to participate just because the DJ says all the single ladies get on the dance floor.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can go to the bathroom
Yeah,
or
that's
you
right.
can have some cake
Yeah.
or you can participate in it and have fun. I personally love participating in it because I'm very competitive and love shoving people out of the way so that I can win whatever it is that we're doing. Not because I want to get married next, just
Uh-huh.
because I like winning.
Yeah.
Um, so there's all sorts of ways you can set boundaries for yourself. And right, the point of any of this, both of those books are very much set up like guidebooks. One is a physical book you can
Hmm.
get, the other's an ebook. They're very much set up like guidebooks for with very practical help, very practical steps. But the point of any of this is not to stack stack things so perfectly that you never have to feel any uncomfortable feelings ever again.
Hmm.
That's not reasonable. It's not possible. But you can learn. You can learn
Yeah.
about yourself. You can learn about what's best, how to set yourself up best to be present for other people and yourself.
Yeah.
So, setting a boundary that's like, hey, I'm going to get a hotel room by myself because weddings are so freaking overstimulating and exhausting that I cannot share a space with a human being after that. I got to go back to my own space
Yeah.
and take a shower. And so I'm going to renegotiate my budget so that I can prioritize that because I
Yeah.
need that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's great. Um, so yeah, don't be afraid to say no so that your yeses can be more meaningful
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
is my biggest advice.
I love it. MaryB, this has been fun. We could keep talking for a long time. I
Mhm.
don't think that's fair to you. And I want to make sure that we give you a chance to let our listeners know where to find you, where to find those books, where to find your podcast, where to find all the cool stuff that you're writing and creating, and all your merch, which is super fun. Will you maybe just share? I don't know, this is the important give a plug moment of
Sure.
the podcast, but I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at maryb.safrit. The podcast is Found Family with Mary B. Safrit. It's available pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. All of the links for everything are available at marybsafrit.com. That's where my merch is. That's where some of my writing is. That's where you can learn more about the podcast. But yeah, my website's really the hub for all of that, marybsafrit.com. And I have when is this coming out? In August?
Yeah, probably August. Yeah.
August, yeah. I have a Substack where I share kind of more in-depth writing about all this kind of stuff we've been talking about, as well as updates on the podcast and and merch and all sorts of fun stuff. So that's a free list that anybody can join. And I like to provide all sorts of fun, free stuff so that people can really feel known and cared for and welcome wherever they encountered me.
Thanks, MaryB. This has been a really fun conversation. I'm no kidding. I'm going to take the metaphor of the hospitable server at a restaurant to me is that, that there's some water in that I'll carry that around. That is a really important a picture for me that I can walk around with. And
Mm.
thanks for walking me through single life and marriage culture. Thanks for sharing your story of the found family that you've got there in
Mhm.
New York and the Bible study that you're a part of, Kaleidoscope. Thanks for just being real with me and having what felt to me like a sacred conversation. I appreciate you, Mary B.
Thanks, Matt. This is great.
Hey, thanks to all you betweeners out there for listening to this episode of the Between Podcast. Make sure you visit between.church on the internet to sign up for our mailing list. That's probably the most important thing, our email list. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. You can check out our 5-minute sermons, 5-ish minute sermons that we post every week. Follow us on social media. We got daily prayers. We got all sorts of other content. And join our community fully. We invite everyone. You are welcome here, no matter who you are or where you're from, no matter what you believe or even if you believe, no matter who you love or how you love, no matter what anybody else has ever told you about you. You are welcome and loved and celebrated here at Between. You know, my favorite church is the space between people. Now go with God's love and create the church between.